H2K Infosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing, and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2K Infosys, how we are different from our competitors. 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus, one-time fee and lifetime access to classes, access to recorded sessions of live classes. H2K Infosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For a free demo class, visit us at h2kinfosys.com.
So let me go ahead and create some program wherein I'm just going to have some issues with the memory. Okay, so right click, new class, memory out of, okay, memory example. Right. So my main intention is to bring down the memory, and for that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say I'm just going to take an array list. Okay. All right. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take an array list. As of now, it's kind of a collection, so don't worry much about it right now. Okay. So list equals to new array list. So it is kind of a bucket. It is kind of an array list which we are going to talk about in the coming sessions. Okay. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a infinite for loop. So when I talk about an infinite for loop, I can simply do it in this way, right? So on top of this, I'm going to say if true. If my condition is true, then I'll just push this inside the if condition, and in this list, I'm just going to say add new of strings. So I keep on adding strings out here. Okay. So in this, I'm just going to say memory. So I'm just creating an object in the in a particular array list. Okay. So when we talk about a list, okay, when we talk about an array, right? So when you say int I equals to new of int of 10, right? So here you have created an array of 10 elements, right? So this is also kind of an array also, which we are going to talk about in the coming sessions. Okay, so just don't bother much about that. So what I'm doing is in this particular list, I'm just trying to add objects in it. Okay, so at last I just want to print this object. Okay, so I just want to say sys out, and I just want to print this object. The way when you print an any of the object, the same way I'm just trying to print this object. Okay, now what happens basically, it comes in your if condition, and as you can see here, this is a kind of an infinite loop. So this loop never stops. Okay, I could have added this, but if I add this inside the just after a for loop, this will give me kind of a compilation error, because it knows that this piece of code is not going to be reachable anytime, because this for loop is not going to end anytime. Okay, so for that reason I had to add it outside this if condition. Okay, now let me run this. Right click, run as Java application. Okay, so it is running right now, and at one point of time you got out of memory error. Why? Because it kept on adding. Okay, so if I put that put a debug point here, debug as Java application. Okay, it came to the for loop right now. So I keep on saying F8, right? So if it is not even going out of that loop. Okay, so if I say F6, right, it goes here, on and on and on, because this is an infinite loop, and you keep on adding memory. If you can see, this is kind of a memory I'm adding out here, and the same thing I'll be using down the line. Okay, so it goes on and on. Okay, so ultimately what happens, the memory gets full, and that's all. I mean, there is no space in the memory, and moreover, when in the previous session we spoke about reachable code. Okay, this code is still reachable for me. Okay, so this will never be garbage collected by the garbage collector. Okay, so at times this is one case wherein if you have a real logical issue with your particular program, you might end up in a memory out of memory error. Otherwise, if suppose your memory is really low and your application has created multiple objects. So in that case, you have to go back and you have to add up extra memory to your application. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this inside a try and a catch block. Surround with a try and a catch block. Okay. So I surrounded this with a try and a catch block, and now let's see whether my code is going to come here, right? So sys out, and I'm just going to say here, okay, no sys out. Okay, I can just give a sys out here, and I just want to say here in exception block. Okay. Now let us see that whether it is going to come here or not whenever there is a memory issue. So I'll just say I am here. Okay. So ultimately copy this, put it here. So I am 0. Okay. So right click, run as Java application, and you can see I'm 0 here, which is getting printed here. And after that it is looping out here. And at what point of time you will be getting a memory out of error. So when you get a memory out of error, there is nothing to catch on error here. Okay. And if you can see here, this block of code did not even get executed, and not even this one. Okay. And if you can see, even this one did not get executed, or this one did not get executed. Okay. Let us try put finally. Finally block. Okay. Now let me run the same program. Right click, run as Java application. So let us wait for a few seconds, and I again got an out of memory error, right? But if you see the code which is present in your finally, it got executed anyhow. So irrespective of whether you have if you have a try, and if in a try you have some kind of issues, okay? So even before coming out of the complete thread, okay, this particular finally block is going to get executed anyhow. All right. Okay. Now let us go back to see what is your user defined exception, what is a checked exception, and what is your unchecked exceptions. Okay. Now till now we have spoken about your try, we have spoken about catch, we have spoken about finally, we have spoken about nested try and a catch block. We can even have multiple catch for a single try also. Okay. Now let us try. I want to create my own user defined exception. Okay. Now, as you know, you are already using an exception here, and there is some functionality which is present in an exception, but still you want to create your own user defined exception and how to use that. All right. Now, let me go ahead and create my own user defined exception. For that reason, I'm going to create a package. So I'm just going to say user defined exception. Okay. Now, when I talk about the user defined exception, so what I have to do, class, let's say I'm going to say my own exception. Okay. So I just say my own exception and say finish out here, which is going to extend your exception. Okay. So it also should come under a particular hierarchy. Okay, if you do not keep that under a particular hierarchy, there is no point in calling in a catch block. Okay. Now here in this case, let's say I'm going to say public, let's say private string exception, or let's say my exception. Okay. And I'm just going to take a public my own exception as a constructor. Okay. And I'm just going to pass on the exception details. Okay. Now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this dot my exception equals to my exception. All right. And then I'll be overriding the toString method of this particular class. And you know that by overriding the toString method of this class, whenever anyone is going to print the object by itself, it is going to invoke the toString method. Okay. Now what am I going to do here is I'm just going to say here user defined exception All right. Plus, what is the name of the exception? That is your my exception. Okay. Now I have created my own user defined exception right now. That is my own exception. I have customized this one because if you see all these messages, these are not customized. These are all given by your Java itself. Okay. But I want to customize my own exception out here. All right. So let us try using this right now. So what am I going to do is if you go back to your arithmetic exception, or let's say, okay, let me create a new class here, user defined exception example. Okay, so let me go here and try to grab all these things. I can even do that. Okay, so okay, let me grab all the things out from here. Copy this, come here and paste it out here. Okay. All right. Now what am I going to do here is whenever there is an exception, I want to basically have my own user defined exception out here. Okay. Instead of having let me even delete all these things for the time being. Okay. Now I just want to say here my own exception exp. Okay. So come here, copy this. Okay, what it says, unreachable catch block. Okay, there is an unreachable catch block here. Try catch. Okay, now okay, let's not do it in this way for now. Let us remove this as of now. Let us remove all these things from here right now. Okay. Now, what am I going to do here is, in the previous session, we spoke about kind of a checked exception and an unchecked exception. Okay. Now, what is a checked exception? What is an unchecked exception? Right. Now, in the previous sections, we have already spoken about kind of unchecked exceptions, because if you remember, if I do not put any of the code in a try and a catch block, so I have no problems at all. Okay. Now, if I put the same piece of code outside, I will not get any kind of compilation issues, because these kind of exceptions are unchecked exceptions. Even though you do not put that in a try and a catch block, it will not give you any kind of issues during your compile time. Always you will be getting any issues during your runtime itself. Okay. But what is a checked exception out here? Okay. Now, as you can know, you have seen here, I have created a user defined exception. Now I'm going to use the user defined exception. Okay. Now I'm just going to say here public void do multiplication. Okay. Now when I say do multiplication, I just want to say throw. Okay. It throws what? I want to say it throws my own exception. Okay. Now what did I do? I told that whenever you invoke a particular API, okay, then that API will throw a kind of an exception for me. All right. Now what that exception is, it could be any kind of exception also. All right. Now what I can do here, I can say, let's say I want to do some multiplication here, or just say I want to return some values out here. Okay. After doing the multiplication. So I want to say here return, let's say 12. Now from here, I'm just going to say, let me pass on two values in this, or int a comma int b. And let me make this as a static also. Okay. And here in this case, I'll just try to call this do multiplication method out here, passing the value 12 comma 3. Okay. Let me make this as okay. From now itself, I have started getting an issue here. So let me, for the time being, let me make this as do division. Okay. Now if you see here, if I do not use my throws over here, all right, so everything is fine here. Okay, because if at all you do any kind of division, let's say a divided by b, I know I'll be getting some kind of exception out here, because if in case I just put a value of 0 out here, right click, run as Java application, I'll be getting a arithmetic exception for sure. All right. Now what, you know that you are going to get an arithmetic exception for sure whenever you do a division. So this is kind of a client program who is going to invoke your do division method, right? So here what I can do is I can just say throws arithmetic exception. Okay, I can just say throws arithmetic exception, and now even your arithmetic exception, if you can see here, it doesn't even give me any kind of compilation issues, because these kind of exceptions are not your checked exceptions. Okay, now what I'm going to do here right now is, instead of having your arithmetic exception, I'm going to put my own exception. All right. So when I put my own exception out here, what it says, when you see the signature of this method, it says do division. So that means it is going to do some division out here of two numbers. But apart from that, it is going to throw a exception. Okay. So as of now, I'm just telling you it is my own exception. Down the line, we'll see in advanced courses, there are a lot of other exceptions which are being thrown. Okay. And we have to catch those exceptions. Now, when you say catch those exceptions, in the sense, if you see the do division method, it is saying unhandled exception of type my own exception. What it says, surround with try and a catch block. Now, when I am surrounding this with a try and a catch block, my compilation issue is gone. That means whenever I'm saying a method which throws an exception, it is your responsibility, or any of the method which is calling this particular method, or any of the program which is calling this method, has to put this particular method under inside a try and a catch block. Okay, so these kind of exceptions are known as your checked exception. Okay, because you as a client you are forced to keep that under a try and a catch block, because you know that you are going to get an exception for sure. And the person who has actually developed this API, he knows that down the line, definitely I'm going to get any kind of exception as such, or my own exception. Okay. So I'm going to throw that kind of exception out here. Okay. Now, let us see what is going to happen right now if I run this application, run as Java application. Okay. Now again, you're getting something like arithmetic exception, and but apart from that, what you're doing is you are getting your own exception which you have printed in your so let us go here and see that. So it is saying here, let me show you, where is that? Okay, hang on. So let me, in this case, I just use my print stack test. So it is actually going back to your print stack test and it is printing everything. Okay. Now in this case, I'll try to use my own exception and I'll try to throw some exception. Okay, I'll do a logic out here and I'll try to throw an exception, so that I will throw my own exceptions out here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say here okay, so let me put this in a try and a catch block right now, try and a catch block, because I know I'm going to get some kind of exceptions out here. Okay, now let me do this calculation out inside int I equals to 0 and I equals to a divided by b. Okay, now I just want to return I out here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is going to say here is, whenever there is an exception, I just want to say throw we copy this, my own exception with a okay. So I'm going to say here, whenever you have any kind of exceptions out here, I'm going to throw a particular kind of exception out here, saying that my own exception. I'll just say here, please enter valid value to divide. Okay, so let us run this application and see what is happening right now. Right click, run as Java application. Okay, now if you can see here, whenever you are adding your own user defined exception and you're trying to pass some values to it, you are able to say user defined exception, please enter valid value to divide, right? So apart from giving you the trace, okay, it is even giving you your own user defined exceptions out here. Okay, now what did you do here? You just told that whenever there is any kind of exception, throw my own exception. Okay, now even I can do something out here saying that if b equals to 0, right, I can just say throw my own exception, right? So what am I doing here? Whenever any condition does not satisfy, I can even say throw new my exception, right? Or if at all something goes wrong, for now I know that this piece of code will never get executed because every time you add 0 to the do division method, right? So this piece of block, this block of code is going to get executed, and from here it is going to throw the exception back to the calling method. Okay. Now let me say please enter valid value to divide from try block. Okay, so right click, run as a Java application. Okay, so whatever the case here, in this case, if you can see, it is again you invoke this b equals to 0, it is throwing your exception. What's wrong? One sec, let me see this. Put this out here, debug as Java application, goes here, goes here. So whenever you say throw, it is going to come to your exception block. Okay, and in the exception block, what all things you have given, the same exception is going to be caught because you're throwing some exceptions, and the same exception is going to be caught in your try and catch block, and you're catching it out here, right? So it comes to your catch block, and in your catch block you're printing your print stack trace, and in your print stack trace, what all messages you're given out here, right? You are basically going to see that particular issue. Okay, so this is, and here what did we see? We spoke about your an exception, something like your user defined exception, and we spoke about your throw, we spoke about your throws. Okay, now whenever you say throws, that means this method is capable of throwing a kind of an exception which you have to catch in your code. Now what if I comment this out and use this out here, right? Now whenever you comment this out, your particular program, okay, you cannot throw this kind of exception from your catch block, because whenever you throw a particular kind of exception, that exception should be there in the signature of your program. Okay, now even if you see here, your do division method does not even throw any kind of exception, so you cannot even catch this kind of exception because it says that unreachable catch block for my own exception, because this method is not even throwing your my own exception, so there is no point in catching this exception. So I can basically use simply exception out here. Okay, should you have to say new every time you throw new? Yes, yeah, we have to always create an object and we have to throw that kind of exceptions all the time. Okay, so right click, run as Java application. So everything goes fine here, right? So let us not even think about this for now. All right, so yes, you have to always say new because you are going to create a new object and you're supposed to throw that object out. Okay, exception. I didn't get your question, Lydia. What is that exception?
The top one, I had a typo.
Okay.
So it's the same question. Instead of ECP, I just wrote exception down. It was a typo. So
okay,
I didn't think you understood.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, it's the same question. You answered the question. Thank you.
All right. So one thing to take care of here, at times you want to throw your own exception. Okay, so always you go with your user defined exception. You can very well customize these things. Okay, so main objective of having a user defined exception is to customize your own exception. Okay, and as I told you in the previous sessions, most of the times out of your 100% of your code, at least 20 to 30% of your code goes with your exception handling itself, because it is one of the most important concept. Okay, and what is a checked exception? What is an unchecked exception? As you can see, if I am putting that in it, whenever any of the method signature, and this kind of signature we will see a lot when we speak about your advanced courses. Okay, so it is just to understand what is a throws and what is a throw. So whenever you want to throw something, you can throw it by saying throw new exception. That means you're throwing a stone. Okay, now when you say throwing a stone, so somebody has to catch that stone, right? So you are saying that whenever there is a method call which is actually a checked exception. Why do I say this as a checked exception? Because this by itself is throwing an exception, so you have to catch that exception. Now why I did not get a compilation error here? Because this my own exception is a subclass of your exception, so very well I can do it in this way also, but you can even do it in this way also. Okay, any questions out here? Can we have exceptions that are static in order to avoid creating objects by using new keyword? Yeah, it's a good question. Can we have an exception that is static in order to avoid creating object by using new keywords? Yes, I think we can do it. Yes, we can do that. Okay. So, but again, you have to create something, has to be thrown here, right? You have to throw an object out here. Okay, you can have a framework wherein you can invoke some static methods and you can throw those things, but as a general practice, you always say throw new my own exception out here. Okay, you can try that as your homework and let me know. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're saying throw exp, right? You can do that. Okay, but I want to throw my own user defined exception. I cannot give a message, right? See, if you run this application right now, run as Java application, you are not giving any your own user defined exception is not getting printed out here, right? Now if you say copy this and paste it out here, right? So it's what it says, unreachable code. And why it is unreachable code? Because you are doing some operation. That operation is not going to throw your my own exception. See it closely here. Okay. Now, why this particular, when you talk about this method, do division, I am very well fine here in the, I'm having a try and a catch block here, right? Now let me just toggle this. Let me just revert this back now. Okay. And just copy this piece of code and put it out here. Okay. Let me say int I equals to, let's say 3. Okay. Now why did I get a compile time error out here? Because is this code saying that it is going to throw my own exception? No, but which code says? This code says that whenever I'm going to use my do division out here, this piece of code is going to throw my own exception. So for that reason, we are catching my own exception out here. Okay.
I see.
Okay.
There was a code that you had instead of throwing the exception in the catch block, you were throwing the exception in the try block.
Right. Right.
So in that case, since you are throwing it anyway in the try block, it comes to the catch block, and then you can just rethrow the same message.
Yes, I'll show you the other way out also. Okay, if b equals to 0, throw new my own exception. Okay, now what basically happens, I'm not putting in a try and a catch block. If I am putting that in a try and a catch block, so I have to, okay, if I'm putting that in a try and a catch block, so it ultimately goes to your catch block, and from the catch block itself something gets thrown here, right? So here in this case I'm taking out all those conditions and I'm saying if b equals to 0, throw my own exception. I'll just say here, please enter valid value. So right click, run as Java application. Okay, now this is not getting reachable out here right now. If I say here, okay, not reachable, so I'll just say I equals to int I equals to a divided by b, and I'm just going to return I out here. Okay, before even that I'll just make this as 0 because there is no point in having that over there, and I'll just say I equals to so and so. Okay, so ultimately let's see what's going to happen right now. Right click, run as, what is run as? Okay, run as Java application. Right now it says before even coming to this piece of block, it encountered that there is some fault with the value which we are getting it as an input out here. So if b equals to 0, just throw this. Okay, other way out, I can put that in a try and a catch block. I can even throw that. Ultimately it is going to come to the catch block. It is not going to get executed from there itself. Okay, so this way I can even throw my own exception. All right, other way out, I can put that in a try and a catch block. From the catch block, you can even throw the exception also. Okay,
in the try and catch block, you can throw the same exception we just created, right?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Yes, we can still throw the same exception, but we cannot add some extra message to it. Okay.
Not add. Okay.
So for that reason, you are having your own user-defined exceptions.
I see.
Okay. All right. Now,
Jairam, could you please write instead of throw exp what you had written before?
where exactly?
32, line number 33 or whatever. Yeah.
33.
Yeah, you had written instead of exp.
Mm-hmm.
What originally you had written, could you please write that? It was easy to understand.
Okay. So initially it was throw new exception. Okay. Now, okay. Let me create a new method out here, and that method is going to use my do division. All right. So what am I going to do is, all right. Now the concern is, I've got a do division method, and there is one more method. Okay, and I'm just going to say do calculation. Okay, so let me keep it short and simple. Do calculation. Okay. So that means it is going to do some sort of calculation. Terminate. All right. So it will do some sort of calculation, and again there might be some kind of issues to it. Okay, and well, let me say return. Okay, so return 2 divided by 0. I'm just hard coding these values for now. Okay, I'm not passing anything as a parameter. Okay, so I think you guys are comfortable if I'm not even passing any parameters also, right? So I'm just hard coding the value 2 divided by 0. So here in this case, I'm saying do calculation, which is again throwing my own exception. And again, I have got do division here, which does some manipulation, and it again throws my own exception. Okay. Okay, let me keep it as a divided by b. Okay. Now, okay, let me do one thing. Let me just take a new class so that I don't touch any of these examples. Java. Okay. New class. UD exception 2. Finish. Right. Now here in this case, I'll be using the methods of your, let's say, user defined exception example, right? Now in this case you have got already do division method and a do calculation method. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to create an instance of my user defined exception example, and I am going to use that particular methods of this user defined exception example. So I'll just create an say user defined exception example UDEE equals to new of this one. Okay, and then I'll just basically say UDEE dot do calculation, right? And then I'll just try to pass some values to it, 2, 3. Okay, as you know, this is going to give me a unhandled exception type of my own exception, because you have to put a try and catch around this, because this is a checked exception. Why do you say it is a checked exception? Because it is throwing an exception, and in your code you are supposed to catch that exception. So always click on hover on this and just surround with try and catch block. Okay, if you're okay to write, you can even write down. I'm pretty much lazy to write, so I'm not writing out. Okay, now sorry, you have got one more, let's say you have got one more method, that is a do calculation, right? Now even you want to say do calculation on your UDEE. Okay,
Jairam, I have a very quick question.
yeah.
So when you say throw at the signature of the method,
Right.
why usually the programming practice is to always check for an exception towards the end of every logic, right? Usually in programming we do that. And what is the purpose of asking to throw?
Okay.
When you are already doing that in the method.
Right, yeah. Now, the concern out here is, let's say you are not even throwing anything and everything goes fine, you're putting everything in a try and catch block, correct? Now, sometimes what happens, as you know, there are a lot of checked exception and unchecked exceptions. Like unchecked exceptions are arithmetic exceptions, right? Now, you very well go ahead and do some manipulation, and you do not even put that in a try and catch block. Okay, at that point of time you get in trouble during runtime. At times, let's say you feel that okay, my piece of code is really good and it will never throw any kind of exception. You go ahead, you do that. I have seen people so confident that they say that my piece of code is really good. Even I have done the same mistakes at times, not now, at the previous stage of my experience. I say, okay, this piece of code will never throw any kind of exception. Okay, so I use a particular API. Let's say I'll just say public void do calc. Okay, so I have this API out here, and this API does a lot of code here. Let's say this is code to calculate tax, code to calculate score, right? And then what I do, I invoke this particular, let me make this as static, and I invoke this particular piece of code, keeping in mind that everything should be good with this piece of code, right? And after this piece of code, I have got some other what happened? Unreachable code. Okay, let me push this down. Okay, now I'm pretty much confident. So after this piece of code, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call my do calculation again. Let's say, for example. Okay, now what happens next? Your days passes by, everything goes fine, but all of a sudden what happened? This piece of code started giving you some junk values. It has started giving you exceptions, right? What do you do in that case? You very well come back and do some manipulations out here. But who has written this code? A guy who has written this code, he did not even analyze that this piece of code is going to throw some kind of exceptions down the line. Okay, let's say this tax calculation is only taking care of calculating tax till 2020. Okay, after that, if he did not even keep that in mind, or somehow his piece of code went wrong, Until 2020, everything went fine. After that, after 2020, all of a sudden when it came to 2021, his code started breaking out here. Okay, so he did not analyze those things. But when he analyzes those things, what he'll do is he'll say that guys, whoever is going to use this particular API, they have to put that in a try and catch block. Now, I did not put that in a try and catch block. Now, if I do the code, I did not put that. Now, if a very experienced guy is what he does, he just say surround with try and catch block. Okay. So for the experienced guys, when he did the coding, everything went fine. And if any exception went wrong here, he went to the catch block. He did some manipulation out here, and then he calculated something else also. Okay. Ultimately, for the experienced guys, he did not even break the execution of the logic or execution of the flow. When I say execution of the flow, starting from executing from line number 20 to line number 45. Okay, so nothing got broken out here, everything went fine. Correct? Now, how will even if he's a new guy or is a very new, he doesn't have any experience, how will I force him to catch these kind of exceptions? For that reason, I have to say throws a particular kind of exception. Let me say here as throws my own exception, right? So when you say throws my new exception, even experienced guys, newcomer comes in and he has this piece of code right out here, right? Now, okay, I have anyways put that in a try and catch block. So let me just copy this. I should have told this using my main program itself. Okay. Now, if I have this right now, it is going to say unhandle exception. Now, if I do not have this throws class, I'll talk about the other things also shortly. Okay, so if I do not have anything out here, everything goes fine in the main class. Okay, so ultimately what you're doing, you're forcing the user to put that in a try and catch block, because you know that some kind of issues are going to definitely happen when you use these kind of methods. Is that pretty much clear? Okay, now next is why I did not get, when I have put that over here, I did not get any kind of compile time error, right? Why is it I did not put that in a try and catch block out here? Reason is, you know that you are going to throw an exception. This method is going to throw an exception. That's what we have it out here. Okay, sorry. Throws my own exception. Okay. Now, when I say throws my own exception, obviously this is going to blow me up because I'm not putting that in a try and catch block. Now, why is this not blowing me up? Because by itself, this method signature says that it is going to throw my own exception. Okay. Now, as I was saying here, if you have multiple methods, let's say you have your do division and your do calculation. Okay. You have a bunch of methods, all the methods are throwing some or other kind of exceptions out here, right? So if I say 2 and 3 out here, and I know this method is again going to throw my own exception. So again, I have to put this piece of code in a try and catch block, surround with try and catch block, right? So right now, everything is fine out here, right? Now, instead of putting it try and catch block for each and every method out here, what I can do on the signature of the method, okay, I can just say throws my own exception. All right. So when I say throw my own exception, let me comment this out and copy this, push it here. Doesn't even give me any exception. Copy this and push it out here. Okay, so whenever you define with the help of the signature of this particular method, saying that this particular method is throwing some exception or XYZ exception, you can specify that on the signature of the method itself. So when you specify in the signature of the method, you basically will not have to put everything in a try and catch block. Okay, and you have to be very much careful of which all methods you want to put it in this way. Now, if you have only one method call, you can even do it in this way. If you have multiple method calls, it is always good to have each and every method in a try and catch block, because this method does some functionality, this method does some other functionalities. Okay, now
Jairam, I think I have one question.
Yeah.
In PL SQL, usually when we write a procedure, what we do is we handle the exception,
Right.
and then you save it in the database, and whoever uses it, and whenever it breaks, we know that which procedure it is breaking. Right. So now in this case, what we are doing is we are forcing the implementation or whoever implements that method to put the code in try and catch the exception, right? So, I mean, coming from the procedural programming background, which one, I mean, how is this efficient compared to, that what I am telling?
Okay, now when you talk about PLSQL, what do? You basically log it in the database itself, right? Now I can do the same out here. Let's say if any kind of exceptions comes up, right? So I can very well log this kind of exception. I can open a database connection and I can basically push, let's say here in this case, what is giving, whenever you're trying to execute this program, it is saying use a different exception, please enter valid value to divide, right? Now, it is basically running in a single thread itself, and we'll still talk about threading concepts down the line, okay? So I can put the entire piece of code with the timestamp, everything in the database, saying that this piece of code has got some issues and I have logged that in the database. I can even very well log that in the database also, okay? And apart from that, when you talk about exceptions, what are you trying to achieve here? You're trying to achieve something like you are not even breaking the execution of the flow, okay? So even we can log that in the database. Why do we need to log that in the database? Because we want to analyze the data down the line, why these kind of exceptions has come up. Yes?
Yeah, I'm not saying the exception to be logged in the database. I'm saying we save this, like here their object, but in PL SQL we save the procedure, the method itself in the database, and so anybody can use it in future.
Right.
Like the method do calculation will be on the database and they can use it.
Correct.
So what we do is in do calculation, we have an exception handler, and you handle the exception and you give it as a package to the person who is going to use it. So I'm trying to see what is the advantage of here. I mean, I am thinking it's like we are forcing the person who is going to use this method to try and to catch that exception, instead of the person who has written that should be handling the exception. So with Java, what is the significance that we are forcing that the implementation or whoever implements it?
Right. Now, as I said, probably in the previous session, we can do it the other way out also. I can handle all kind of exceptions out here itself. Okay. I can handle all kind of exceptions out here. I can do all the logic. Let's say when you talk about do division or do calculation. So if I talk about do calculation, I can do everything in this block of code itself. Okay. But ultimately, what happens when you talk about your database? Okay, let's talk in practical right now. When you talk about some transaction, okay, you expect that if any issues comes up with a particular transaction, everything should get rolled back, right? That's how you deal with your transaction level, right?
Yeah.
Now, in that case, I have to throw something to the system. If I do not throw something to the system, will system understand what to do next? System will not understand anything. I have to explicitly say to the system that, okay, this kind of issue has happened. Now I'm throwing my own exception, roll back the entire transaction. Okay. And again, this is one example. When coming back to here, if I want to do some small, let's say when I do this calculation out here, I say that if the value of b equals to 0, I can give some default value, right? I can say value equals to 0. I can say b equals to 12. I can still handle these kind of issues with my piece of code. Okay. Now, as of now, I'm not sure if it'll be it's a good time to tell you deep into it, because most of the folks.
No, that's okay. I just, I didn't intend to ask you, but I'm just, thinking, our Java programmers, they talk a lot about, how all these are so, advanced than PLC. So I'm trying to, trying to understand the significance. I'm sorry for taking most of your time.
But you got the concern at least at this point of time?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks.
Yep. We'll see down the line when we talk about transactions. We'll talk about a lot of other things in the advanced courses. See, these things you have to mug it up, or you have to understand it properly, because this is the base. If you understand these things down the line, all the advanced courses are based on these all concepts. Okay. So when we'll see, there are a lot of methods which has to be used as which has to be put that in a try and catch block. Why? Because those are all checked exceptions. Checked exceptions are always supposed to be put in a try and catch block. Okay. If you do not want to put all the methods in a try and catch block, put the signature as your my own exception. Okay. In real time, always, let's say here in this case, I have used my do division. Let's say the do division might use one more method also. Okay. So whenever you have any of your private methods, so if I make any kind of a private method, okay, private void call me. So always make sure that the private method which are having, it basically throws an exception directly. Okay. Now throws exception, right? And whenever you call these methods in the main method, always do not make this main method as my own exception, which throws my own exception. Instead, always put these things in a try and catch block. Okay, surround with try and catch block. Okay, so this is the best practice of doing it. Always make sure the main method, which is actually calling all the child methods, and I know these child methods are throwing some sort of exceptions. Always in the main method, you always have a try and catch block in this way, and all the other methods, they can have a throws my own exception on the signature itself. Okay. Pretty much clear? Any other questions popping up from anyone? Can you please repeat concept?
Jairam, could you please explain the last part which you just mentioned? The last,
okay.
When we add to the main method, or just that thing,
right?
Please.
Okay, so here the concern is I have got two methods out here. Okay, let's say private void call me and private void call me again. Okay, now why these are private? Because these methods are helped to do some sort of behavioral concepts, or it does some calculation, or it does some important things inside this particular method call itself. Okay, let's say I want to say call me, and from your call me I want to say call me again, right? Now while doing this kind of operation might throw some kind of exceptions. Okay, I basically want to say that if anything goes wrong in your call me method, I don't want to handle it in your call me method itself. I want to handle these kind of exceptions in your main method itself. Okay, so I very well copy this. If I make this a static, I have to make this also static. Okay, now if you see here, just to give you a heads up, you cannot invoke a non-static method from a static method. I think we have already seen those things. So you cannot make a static reference to a non-static method call me again from the type you blah blah blah. Okay, so again you have to make this also static. All right, now call me, I say call me out here, right? Now since this is a main method, okay, in the main method you will do lot of logic, right? Let's say this at this point of time you're saying call me, second time you'll say do division, right? Now there are a bunch of APIs you might call in your main method itself, right? Now always whenever you are making any of the calls in your main method, do not make that main method as throws, okay, throws my own exception or any kind of exception. Do not put that in your method signature at all, because if at all there are any kind of issues which are coming up, you cannot basically, or let me say here as exception out here. Okay, you cannot basically catch, or if anything goes wrong out here, automatically from here itself the execution stops basically. Okay, so always make sure that whenever you use these kind of things, always have the private methods which throws the exception. Do not put anything in a try and catch block. That's well and good, but all these methods in your main method, put that in a try and catch block, so that you handle your exceptions properly in your code, so that you basically do not disturb this piece of code to be executed. Okay, so I put this in a right click, source, where is that, refactor, okay, whatever. All right, so you just don't put this in the signature of this signature as your throws exception in your main method, or it is not even main method, any kind of method which is your main method, which is when we talk about the actual transaction. Okay, there'll be some callback methods which will be automatically invoked by your container. Okay, so by your system itself. So on those methods we should never put anything on the signature itself. Always you put everything in a try and catch block here. Okay, surround with catch and surround with try and catch. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, any concerns? If there are no concerns, I hope I would request you guys to please practice this. And one last thing. Okay, hang on. New class, okay, so I'm going to create a human and just say public void human behavior. Okay, and the time I declared this, I just say throws exception. I create new class woman extends finish human. Okay, and I want to override the, copy this, paste it out here. Right, I did an override of this particular method human behavior. Right, copy my own exception, remove this. I am still good right now. If you see here, the superclass human behavior, it is actually throwing an exception out here, but your subclass woman extending human, it is overriding the method, but again it is throwing some exception again. Okay, even I can say exception itself, I can use the same signature, or I can use a signature lower than that. Now sorry, I can use an exception lower than the exception. Now when I say lower than the exception, if you see exception, right, so if you see my own exception is actually extending your exception class. Okay, so for that reason, when you talk about your subclasses, when I talk about subclasses and superclasses, superclass is this, subclass is this. Okay, let us try exchanging the things. Now your superclass is saying my own exception. I come back to my subclass and I say exception. Okay, make sure your subclasses cannot throw an exception higher than the exception which is present in your superclass methods. Okay, always you will be getting a compile time error. It says that exception is not compatible with the throws clause in your human behavior. Okay, this is an interview question. It's one of the important concept. It is the guy who are well experienced, they understand this, because whoever is writing your exception framework, they have to catch up all these kind of things. No doubt, when you write all these things in your Eclipse IDE, it'll give you the errors upfront, but as a concept you should know this also. Okay, so never ever throw, or you cannot ever throw any exceptions which is your, in which your superclass has got a kind of an exception and subclasses you're trying to throw anything on top of that. Okay, so always if you see this exception, you have your exception. The same thing goes for when we talk about other exceptions also down the line. There are a lot of other exceptions, we'll come to know what are the other exceptions present. If you can see, there are a lot of other exceptions present, and still a lot more we are going to see and whatnot. Okay, so from here we are going to complete our exception handling. From tomorrow we'll talk about the threading concepts. Okay, so once we finish up our threading concepts, we will talk about the collections. Okay, and once we finish the collections, we'll be talking about the input output operations, or we can basically toggle that as well. Okay, so I'll decide what to do next. Any more questions from anyone as of now?
Could you please include me in your student list, because I'm not getting any mails or the recordings link in my mail.
Recording link, I believe, Rashmi, you have to speak to the admin folks.
Okay.
If you can do one thing, if you can shoot out an email to me, Jairam.
Let me know the email ID, yours.
Yeah, you can shoot out an email to me, and I'll just forward it to the admin folks.
Okay, great.
Jairam, this is Pratima. I need those videos too. I'm not getting any emails or.
H2K Infosys provides world-class online IT training, staffing, and software testing solutions to customers worldwide. H2K Infosys, how we are different from our competitors. 100% job-oriented training, hands-on project work, cloud test lab, resume preparation and review, mock interviews, robust syllabus, one-time fee and lifetime access to classes, access to recorded sessions of live classes. H2K Infosys has won the trust of thousands of students worldwide. For a free demo class, visit us at h2kinfosys.com.